Thank you so much for coming here tonight to Data and the Greater Good, so close to the holiday season. And this month we just have one speaker to keep it short, but it's a really great speaker, so we're excited. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to thank our sponsors. So our first is Workbench, who sponsors the space. Workbench is an enterprise VC fund here in New York City. They invest in enterprise startups throughout the country and have a great enterprise tech community here. You can see many of their companies on that wall over there by the pizza, and their startups are always hiring. If you'd like to learn more about job opportunities with these startups, be sure to grab a business card from the front desk. Thank you, Workbench. And then I'm going to have Matt from Development Guild come up and speak about our other sponsor.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Hi, everyone. So my name is Matthew Weber from the Development Guild. We help nonprofits achieve what their core mission is. So we help them find really good people who can execute on their mission. We help them with fundraising so that they have the funds to actually achieve that mission. And we help them with strategy, and myself, I work on their data and analytics team. We're really happy to be here. If you're curious about how we might be able to help you with your organization, I'll be around afterwards, so I'd love to talk to you. So, Mary, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, I forgot we have slides. But we do work with a lot of arts organizations, too. So this is our list of arts organizations. We don't just work with arts organizations. We work with environmental organizations like Nature Conservancy. We work with schools like Harvard, MIT. We work with hospitals like Johns Hopkins University. We work with a lot of great organizations. We're very proud of the organizations we work with. And we'd love to hear about what organization you're with. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Matt and Development Guild. And then tonight's speaker is Nora Gomez-Strauss. She is the Director of Digital Strategies at Public Art Fund, and I'll turn it over to her now. And after she speaks, there'll be a time for question and answers.
So thank you all again so much for coming tonight. I know it's a really busy time. We're about like 5 days away from Christmas and New Year's and all of that. So thanks for coming. I thought I would start off by telling you a little bit about myself. I am born and raised in Queens, New York. I currently work at the Public Art Fund, as Mary said, as a Director of Digital Strategies. Before that, I was at the Queens Museum. My undergraduate is like sort of related, art education and photography. Then I went on to study arts and cultural management at Pratt Institute. And it was actually when I was at the Queens Museum that I started in my last year of grad school that I got more involved in digital. Social media was really new at the time. It was like 2006-ish, 2007 maybe, I kind of forget. And one day I said to our director at the time, my first job there was being his assistant, and I said, there's this new thing called Twitter, and I'm not really sure what it is, but I think we should join it, and it would be really great for the museum. And it kind of really took off after that. It was really great for the Queens Museum. Their audience is still really growing, and it's been a great asset for them. And then after that, and he was kind of ready for a change and to keep going in the digital realm of things within the nonprofit world. And I was lucky enough to end up at the Public Art Fund, which was a place I had looked up to since I grew up in New York and had seen so many of their shows as I was young through older. And I guess I'm going to start off with a really brief or 5-minute video which will kind of introduce you to us and what we've done over the years.
When I think of any kind of important public artwork that I've seen or known about in the city, it turns out it was Public Art Fund who commissioned it.
Even in Sydney, I was certainly well aware of the very groundbreaking work that the Public Art Fund was doing in New York City. I was fascinated with projects like Rachel Whiteread's Water Tower. I think of Francis Alice's Modern Procession.
Jeff Koons at Rockefeller Center, the Olaf Eliasson Waterfalls.
Sarah Z's piece in Doris Friedman Plaza. Liz Larner, Franz West. I mean, just pieces that sort of dance in one's imagination.
It's a great privilege of being in the city of New York to be able to view incredibly high-quality artworks at all hours of the day and in all parts of the city, not just those sanctioned and designated for art.
My first experiences of New York are through the Public Art Fund, actually. I remember just thinking, wow, this is what makes a city great, this kind of public service.
When you have artists who are challenging us to rethink what we already know in the ways that I could say Ugo Ardenone or David Hammonds or Amanda Ross Ho or so many other artists have within the context of the Public Art Fund, it leaves an impact.
The Public Art Fund provides connections to communities that might not necessarily be going to buy a ticket to look at art. And that is the nature of culture, it just is.
To experience art as Public Art Fund has made possible has enhanced the quality of life in our city.
If there are questions, if there's a public outcry, we know how the public can be angry at art, which I think is fantastic. I mean, the world is crumbling around us, and you put a piece up on Park Avenue, and thousands of letters go to the mayor. What are you spending money on this stuff for? Exactly. Okay, that's all right. It is causing an emotional response for some reason, and art has always done that. Throughout history, art has raised a fury of emotion.
An incredible thing about my mother was the way she saw this city and the people in it. She believed in people and their ability to appreciate art, and she believed that everyone deserved to be exposed to art, as well as this notion that giving artists an opportunity to use the city as their canvas could change the way the city looked and felt. The art does create a dialogue, and the dialogue's what it's all about.
Our first 40th anniversary exhibition was called Commercial Break. It's very much inspired by Messages to the Public, which is the iconic Public Art Fund exhibition series that took place in Times Square from 1982 to 1990. Open House is the project that the artist Liz Glynn has developed for Doris Friedman Plaza. Feels like a wonderfully appropriate exhibition for this 40th anniversary year. Anish Kapoor's Dissension will be on view in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and of course Public Art Fund famously presented his Sky Mirror at Rockefeller Center. This is a major new work. It's something Anish has been developing and dreaming about for years. Katya Novitskova's Earth Potential will be on view in City Hall Park. And we've been in dialogue with Ai Weiwei for nearly 7 years. He was one of the first artists I really wanted to work with when I started at Public Art Fund. This project takes the very simple motif of the fence and then explores that all throughout the city. It feels so important to do this project right now.
The Public Art Fund has had the privilege of collaborating with some incredibly gutsy and visionary partners who took a chance on us. And 40 years of city administrations and commissioners of Parks Department and Transportation, and of course the mayors who lead them. We have an extraordinary board and an extraordinary staff. That energy and commitment is unparalleled, if you ask me. Thank you to the over 500 artists we've worked with over 40 years to change the experience of life in New York City. And for all of the people who have been open-minded and generous of spirit and welcomed these works and loved these works and engaged with these works, I say thank you to them who also have made this crazy enterprise a reality.
So Public Art Fund has been around since 1977. We present dynamic contemporary art for free for everybody, every day, all around New York City. These are a few of the numerous works we've had. Okay, so how many people here believe they have seen a Public Art Fund work in their life? That is so great to see.
But presumably we have, because we
Right, because we're all over the
So
place.
it doesn't really say when it's written in it, and you don't go looking for it, but it does
Right.
right.
So one of our challenges, because we're not a gallery or a museum that has a building, is having people associate a work with us, because you can walk by something and you're not going to be like, that's MoMA, that's Whitney, whatever. So we depend so much on online and data to know who our audience is and who is visiting our work. Here's more of our stuff. So what I'm going to focus on a little bit, or a lot, is this show that we had up last year with the artist Ai Weiwei called Good Fences Have Good Neighbors. Ai Weiwei is arguably one of the most famous living artists alive. We're really lucky to have this project with him. It had been in the works over many, many years. It had been temporarily put on hold when he was arrested in China. And then, thankfully, this project became a reality. It was over 300 works all over New York City in all 5 boroughs, which is something really great for us, because a lot of our works are in one neighborhood at a time, and in 2017 we're lucky enough to have 2 exhibitions that reached all 5 boroughs, but this being the larger one. And it focused on the idea of fences and borders and the migration crisis, which has always been an issue, and unfortunately was very timely at the time this was presented, and still is. So we had a few larger works. One was at Washington Square Park. This was on 60th and 5th Avenue. This was in Queens. We had a few of these all over the city. So we had to think, it's so great that this is really accessible to people, but one, how do people know that this is part of our exhibition? And 2, how are we going to get people to actually interact with this, and for us to know that they're interacting with this? Because beyond like any digital tools we have, we really don't have any way of finding these things out. Like before online, we kind of depended on word of mouth or people calling in, but thanks to social media and things like Google Analytics, we can know how people are interacting with our work, or at least people who have access to the internet. There are more of them. So we decided to make this web page on our site really interactive. Before this, we have a website that was relaunched in 2012. Before that, we had actually had the same website maybe for as long as the internet had existed. And thankfully, it was revamped. We had a new brand identity. We had a new site. And before that, we used to do microsites for a lot of our banner shows. But again, we didn't know what people were doing with it. So we had a new website in 2012, and we decided all shows would have a web page. We wouldn't create a site for each of them. But if there was like a really big exhibition, we would customize that page so that we had access to the analytics within that. So we decided to really go all out with this one. So you could log on your phone, tablet, or desktop, and you could either go to the left side, which was learning about the show, or to the interactive map, which had geolocation abilities, and it was the first time that we did anything like that. So if you clicked on it and you agreed to have yourself geolocated, it would tell you what works were nearby, and hopefully you were nearby a work anywhere you were in New York City. And then you could scroll through, most like you were near a banner, or if you were near one of the larger works. And then you could click on it and learn more information. And in addition to that, you could log into another page we had, which just asked the question, how did your family arrive here? Because the exhibition had so much to do with immigration, and New York is a city of immigrants. We wanted to know people's stories and for everybody to have their ability to share that. And we didn't know how many people actually participate in that, so this was kind of an experiment. And we used Medium because that was a kind of system that was installed already, and we just integrated it with our site. So you didn't have to necessarily log into Medium to do it. If you had an account, you could do that, but if you were not a Medium user, you wouldn't know. And people could they logged in, and within a few sentences, they shared the story of how they or their family ended up here. There's more of that. And you could zoom in and see what was around you. And then you could see what other works were nearby, because, again, without this, people wouldn't know that this was around them. So this was incredibly useful to us. And then beyond that, social media was really important, because not everybody will go to our website, but we have such a large audience that will log onto one of our social media accounts and see what's going on and be able to share their experiences. And again, because we don't have a central place where everybody is coming in and out, we don't know what people are saying or how they're interpreting our exhibitions. So we really depend on things like Twitter and Instagram, and in some ways Facebook, to know how people are interpreting our shows and what they think about them. So we were, for this show, because this doesn't happen for every show, but for this show, we were lucky enough to have people like Dan Rather and Olivia Wilde and other people log in and say things about them. So going beyond that, thinking about how we analyze digital at Public Art Fund PAF is what we say internally. And I do want to say, I'm the only digital person at Public Art Fund, and when I first came on 7 years ago, this was a role that was kind of created for somebody like me, because it wasn't something that was necessarily thought about before. And even when I first came in, my job was like also traditional marketing and graphic design and a bunch of other stuff. And as we kind of excelled in these areas, I was really slimmed down to only thinking about digital, which has been great for us, and also means our staff has grown at the same time, and other people can kind of focus on these things. So what we think about at Public Art Fund, first of all, is our website. So the way that I think about our website and social media is that they're siblings to each other. So the website is like our information desk, and social media is like our visitor services department. If you want to learn anything about Public Art Fund, anything about any show we've ever done, or what we have on currently, you will go onto our website and you can learn anything, hopefully, is our goal. And then from that, where we are able to see is what shows are people clicking on. And then within that, if we create special content on that page, are people clicking on those links? If we have something special, like we recently had a Tony Oursel show where we created a glossary of terms, because it was based on the history of the Hudson, and he's referencing like 150 things that the everyday person doesn't know about. So with Tony, we created a glossary for that, so you kind of know what you're looking at. And that's also an investment. We are working with a developer to make this, and it's a lot of staff time. So we look to these analytics to see if people are using it, and if it's worth the time and money on our end, because again, we're a small nonprofit, and we have to know what's worth all of that. We're looking at also our video and multimedia, which is something fairly new to us. We've always done for the past few years, we've done exhibition videos for 3 to 4 of our exhibitions a year. We normally have like 6 to 7. And again, we work with a production team that's not us, because I'm one digital person. So we want to know, are people viewing it? And beyond that, are people watching it from beginning to end? Because if people are logging on and watching 10 seconds, we have to think about if that's worth it or not. So we're looking at all of that, and that really drives what our website looks like. And within that, even though we relaunched our website in 2012, everything moved so quickly that just 5 years later, the website was already feeling a little bit or quite outdated. So we did not a relaunch, but a kind of a revamp of it, and we worked with our developer and a graphic designer we were working at the time to update it in every way possible. So we did a lot of user testing, which was really useful, because there were some things that we thought weren't working, and we wanted to know if everybody else thought those weren't working. So it was great to see how those functionalities were or not working out for everybody, but then there were also other elements that we would have never thought of if it hadn't been for that. Things like that the color of that typeface is too close to what it's sitting on, which, as somebody who looks at our website every day, I never think about that. Or how long is it taking you to click on this when we want you to click on that? So that was really useful, and we did a revamp of that. And then looking beyond that to social media, which is our visitor services department, because I spend a lot of time not just looking at what people are saying, but also answering questions, because it's the only way that people really have access to us at all, unless you are comfortable enough to pick up the phone and call, the person who answers the phone every day. It's the one place where people feel really comfortable, not just stating their opinions, but also asking everything they want. But our director-in-chief curator, Nicholas Bohm, once said that Public Art Fund takes away the facade of like decency or something like that, because it's not like when you're in a museum or a gallery, people will express their opinions, but you're still in a place and you know that there are people around you that work in that place. But when you're looking at a Public Art Fund piece, you're out in the open and people are pretty free with what they want to say, which is great, and you should, because we want to create a conversation. And then I think social media lifts that veil like by tenfold, because people really say anything they want. So it's a great way to not just measure how many, like who's coming to our shows, but what people think of our shows. So I wouldn't say that our mission is affected by that at all, because it's always going to be presenting art for free for everybody and presenting artist visions and making them come true. But it helps us make the vision come true very much. So we look at a whole bunch of things on a weekly basis. We have a million Google Sheets, which I look at every other day, and I'm very lucky to have somebody like an intern help me with on a weekly basis. They learn a lot. On Facebook, we are looking at Facebook's native tool, their insights, so we measure our growth. And again, like growing numbers are really great, but beyond that, we want to know what the engagement is, because just because your audience numbers are going up, it doesn't mean, like that doesn't necessarily mean success for us. We really want people to be engaged and for a conversation to be created. So we're also looking at each individual post. We will track each individual post for weeks and track engagement numbers, impression numbers, and think about what that means. Like, what was it about that post and what was it about that show? And then for Twitter, we use Tweet Reach, which tracks our own tweets, and hashtag tracking as well, which measures, how many people are using the official hashtag, which is also not always really accurate, but that we use as a measurement of how successful our signage is. Because not everybody is online, and we want people to know what they're looking at in real time. So signage is so important to us because it gives you an idea of what the show is. It directs you to our website and to our social media, obviously. So when we see the actual official hashtag being used, we know that, we're doing a great job of spreading the word online, but it also means that signage is working. Instagram, we use a million spreadsheets for. We use Instagram Insights because it's the only thing you can use right now for Instagram because of the change in their API, which means we're sitting there looking at our phone at each individual post and tracking impressions and engagement. And we also track the official hashtag also. And also that helps us dictate hashtags for future shows. For example, for a while we were using hashtags that used the letters PAF followed by a word from the show because we thought it associated something with us, and that's something we want to do for our brand, but we saw people using it less and less because who wants to use PAF chairs or something? It's not something that's going to come to your mind right away. So it helped us realize that we had to use something that was more intuitive for the everyday audience member. Flickr, even though it seems like it's not popular anymore, it has its own audience which uses it a lot, and it's a great way to get our images out there, and it's still one of our most popular platforms, and we get a ton of views from it, and it's a great way to spread word about our shows. And Vimeo is what we use to upload our videos and embed them into our website, so that's crucial to us because it's what made us realize that people were actually watching our videos and it's worth investing in, and that we also had a really great finish rate. And beyond that, that people were watching our longer videos. We used to think that our videos around 2 minutes were like the sweet spot because they weren't too long, but we realized even when we made a video that was 3 or 4 minutes long, people were still watching the whole thing, which was very surprising for us, but was great because it means that we can create a more didactic form for people to learn about our show, again, because we don't have a building or desk that you can ask questions at. And then the last element to that on the communications end would be emails. We use MailChimp for all of our emails. And it's just something we're still working through. We really wanted to grow our subscriber list, again, because we have to use kind of any way to get word about what we do in our shows. And we were able to grow our list through events and exhibitions that were ticketed. Everything we do is free, but sometimes we do have ticketed shows because you have to get on a boat or you have to go into a room that's 40 stories up with the Columbus Monument, or you want to come to one of our talks. So we take all of those emails, which is great for us because we get a lot of your data and we get to learn about you, but it also means that maybe our open rate is going to go down because our list is growing and we have to think about what's going to capture people's attention. What is the subject line that gets people to open more, and why is it that people will open emails with emojis in the subject more than not? And lastly, this is an example of our media reports. So I work in communications, and we have 3 other people in the department, and they focus on marketing and public relations. So at the end of every exhibition, we cull together all of our numbers together, which will be website, social media impressions, articles, video, and radio airtime. And we use that as kind of a template for the shows that come after that. And of course, we report these to the board, who love to hear numbers and how great shows did. And again, something like Ai Weiwei is not like everything we do. I don't know when this number will ever happen again, but it was really useful to us. And then again, this is how we use data within communications. Development also uses data very much, but in a very different way. And I think that's mostly it, and that kind of went by really quickly.
If you have a question, I can bring the microphone around to you.
Hi, I have a question about the medium, use of medium. Was the geolocation part of their kind of infrastructure or tools that you used to in that project?
It was not used for the exhibition at all. It was really just for us to give people the ability to give information to where you were at the time. And it was something very new to us that we never used before, and it took like 2 weeks of testing to make sure it worked. But it wasn't part of the work itself, and that is a question we've gotten before.
So it's definitely not associated, it's not medium technology?
No.
This is as much of an operational or technical or operational technical question, but I know you were referring to the ticketed events, and I find it interesting that, well, in the context of what I guess a typical art exhibit would be, one might have an opening and a closing. Have you considered that as a formal, regular structure for all of your events? I suppose that's going to depend largely on on the locale.
Yeah, it depends very much on the location. We'll have opening events which are like pretty small, and they're for like supporters and friends of Public Art Fund. But the first we've been around for 40 years, but the first like big, really open public event was for Ai Weiwei. We kicked off in Washington Square Park with an event that was open to anybody, and it had Weiwei as a speaker, Olivia Wilde because she's an activist, and somebody from the UN Refugee Commission because it was addressing those ideas. But we've yet to have like a big closing event. But it is something that we're interested in
Just
doing.
thinking as you're thinking about collecting metrics, that's one of the areas where.
Right, and we do collect those because we use Eventbrite for both events like talks and for openings. So we do get people's information in that way, but we are only able to ask so many. Like, it's great in the way that you have the ability to really get information from people, but for these like small, intimate events, like think of, it's like you're RSVPing for like a dinner almost, and how much are you gonna want to give away? But it is a great idea.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned in social media, you look at the number of impressions, you quantify that, what is the value of that? What is your objective? So how are you defining success in terms of the number of impressions you want to get and what you wanted to deliver to confirm that you've generated a positive ROI? Because that's one of the challenges with social media. Everybody hasn't figured out how it can generate a positive ROI.
Right, and that's something that I think changes as time goes on. I think for a while, our goal was just to like have audience numbers get bigger and bigger. And for a while that did skyrocket. I think within my first 6 years, our numbers grew something by like 4,000%, which is a crazy number. And then it kind of started to plateau because like how many people are there to join new platforms constantly? So we had to reevaluate and think like, so what are we actually doing with this audience that's there? Which is why we like engagement numbers a lot. Beyond impressions is such a vague number. It's like who could have seen this at some time, but engagement means somebody liked it, somebody commented, and something that we want to do very much is create conversation. So to us, engagement online is part of that conversation. So right now, that's our goal, is to get those engagement numbers, not even just up, but to keep them going at the same rate. But that might change like next year. But it's a good question. But again, I think our goal is to create conversation and to know that people are interacting with it, so that beyond that impression number, that engagement number is important to us, if that answers your question.
So I was just curious, you talked about how you were building these kind of rich tech experiences with the interactive website and whatnot, but I'm curious if you guys have explored using like QR codes or NFC on your signage to augment but also get more metrics as to who's physically interacting with your exhibits.
When I first came on, we started using QR codes, and I thought they were going to be something really great, and there used to be this Tumblr called People Using QR Codes, and it was just all blank pictures, which is how I would describe our experience with it. Like, it's just people don't engage with that element. And we also used to do audio tours, which we thought was a great way to get people engaged, again, that word engaged, and to get them to learn more about our shows. And for a while, those numbers were really great, but as time went on, and I think it was as social media got bigger and bigger, those numbers got smaller and smaller, and social media is free in some ways, and something like an audio tour is not, so the investment just wasn't worth it at some point. Like, we wish it was, because it seems like a really useful tool, but people just stopped using it.
Yeah, so I was working in customer service and natural language processing. So this is coming from that perspective, it sounds like you're manually looking at the text. Have you ever considered any parsing of it by natural language processing to get like the totality of all comments that are happening on social media and analytics on those?
Yeah, I would love to do that. And again, because I'm just one person doing all of that, I think that's within my larger goal and something that I'm really interested in.
Are there any particular technologies that you're looking at?
No, but if you have any to recommend, I would love to hear them.
Hi, are there times that you've talked with the curatorial team on discussing data and discussing what type of exhibitions, what type of artists, what type of shows and themes you'd like to put on?
All the time. We have all staff meetings where we talk about these things, and we also have team meetings, which I'm involved in. And the curator's job will always be to make an artist's vision come true. So they aren't necessarily thinking about what's going to be really popular or what are people going to talk about. But at the same time, when we are developing a show, we'll say, like, this is going to get a ton of Instagrams, or people are really going to be tweeting about it. So it doesn't dictate it, but it helps us kind of flesh out the strategy to roll out the show.
Apologies if you've already talked about this. I only caught the second half, but I'm just wondering how you guys attribute or model attribution towards different channels, right? Like, for example, if you, just from a naive perspective, artists often confront the challenge of like, oh, should I do Instagram? Should I focus more on Facebook? What would yield the most visitors as a KPI? And then, you know, how much time do I track? Or how far back do I look, and how far back am I able to look to be able to see which channel has yielded the most?
For Public Art Fund, we're looking at everything all the time, but or what I think within that question, it might be the same message, it might be like the same post, but our language for everything is very different. You will see us post about the same thing, but our language on Twitter will be so different from what we use on Facebook, because we've looked at who our audience is and we know like what kind of words people are using. Or sometimes we'll say like, you know, this is worth, you know, this many Instagrams and this many tweets, but we know that on Facebook it might not be worth the time, so we're just going to do, you know, a couple of posts on that. But in the case of analyzing everything, like we do it every few days, every week. And then beyond that, when we work with artists, we have certain artists that are like, I only post on Instagram. That's the only thing I'll do if you guys want to do something. And we have some that we like, well, I only do Twitter, or I'm never going to do anything on Facebook, so don't ask me that
If people have the right not to be on Facebook.
Today's the day to ask that question.
I'm not on Facebook, so there's other people.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. I got a PhD in economics. You know, an economist knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. I mean, why do you actually have to do all of this? Is there pressure from the funders? I mean, how's the operation funded? And the funders say, oh, we're going to give you money only if you show that people get really, really excited about what you do? Is that
Definitely
the case?
not. I think our funders are always really excited to see what we're doing, but they're not like dictated by any of this. For us, it's in our mission to make sure as many people see this. So even if one medium is not necessarily, and I won't say which one, as popular at the time, we're still going to try and make sure that audience knows about it. But as far as our funders, they're just excited to like see our reports at the end of the show.
So it's really internal to optimize your own marketing?
Yeah, it's entirely internal, yeah. Again, because it's the only tool we really have. So, yeah.
are there any initiatives in trying to capture alternative forms of engagement data that's not digital? So, I guess this sort of depends on resources and possibly technology. But you mentioned QR codes didn't work out super well.
Right.
But are there sort of thoughts about how, because we're sort of just looking at the interactive map that you had for, I mean, I understand that Ai Weiwei exhibit is sort of an anomaly.
Very much, yeah.
But just seeing something like that, and especially a city like New York where there's so much movement, both internally but also people coming from all over the world and outside of New York, is there a way to capture more granular data? I mean, maybe it's like sort of something very manual, like having a team just go survey for a day, or like on the launch,
right,
or on the closing day of that exhibit. Maybe you could sort of minimize the use of resources and just get sort of an on-the-ground, almost like an anthropological kind of data set, rather than just relying on digital. Because I have seen that sometimes, at least in my experience, whatever it's sort of limited in the spaces that I know, sometimes you miss a lot, especially with something like this, because it's such a physical experience. I'm just sort of curious, are there sort of thoughts about how to do that, or if there are thoughts about collecting
There's so many thoughts. So, again, that show was incredible in a way that we were able to capture so much data and see like what people were clicking on. People were at this location and they looked at it on their phone as opposed to the desktop. Again, which is where we saw that things like this are really great for us and we should invest in them. But you're right, it's really hard to get any kind of that information. So it made us realize that when we do have something that's ticketed, like we had this show called Flow Separation with artist Tower Auerbach this summer, where we were able to go on a boat that was dazzled. Dazzled was this like anti-camouflage used in World War I, where it was like essentially abstract painting on a boat, so that if you were shot at, it would not be direct, and boats would kind of survive this mess. So we had this amazing show. We had to have a ticket to get on a boat because it was time ticketing a certain amount of rides every weekend. And through that, we're able to ask questions like, where do you live? How many tickets? Do you have children with you? And then we started seeing like what we're getting from that. And then we had a show again over the summer where you got free hot dogs from a hot dog bus. It was art, I promise. It was eating as art. So we said, you know, we're gonna hire a company, we're gonna hire people to stand on the line and say, you know, if you wanna get a free hot dog, can you give us your email, your name, and a few other very short 4 or 5 questions. And that was really great for us and information that otherwise we don't really get. But again, it has to be a show that kind of offers that opportunity for that. And after that, we have thought about how do we send actual docents out. We used to have a docent program, we used to have tours, and at some point, people kind of stopped going to them also, which was such a shame because you get to hear from a curator or somebody who knows everything about the show. People just stopped showing up. But we're kind of re-investigating that because we have sent out people like on a Friday afternoon to a show and just walk around and ask people questions. And it's been incredibly useful to us. So I think it is something that we want to revisit now that people are, it seems like people are rethinking their relationship with digital and actually want to experience things. So how do we kind of capture that interest? So the short answer is yes, we are looking more into that, but again, we're still a small nonprofit and we kind of have to think about what our resources are and what the best use of our time is.
Just a follow-up question, I guess, bouncing off of his question and your answer to my first question, which was that a lot of different artists sometimes have very specific preferences about what social channels that they participate in. I guess what I'm asking is, do artists, specifically like now, especially now, exhibit any sort of preference about you asking their audience and them participating in data collection in a way where it's like, you know, do you have any, like, what is the kind of the conversation around the collection of data in relation to art and exhibition?
It's actually never been a huge issue, and it's only within recent years that we're starting to collect this information more. And even then, it's like, what is your email? How old are you? Do you live in New York City? If you don't live in New York City, you know, what's your zip code? And nobody really seems to have an issue with that. And if anything, I think artists are really interested in knowing who is it that's visiting their shows. I think artists' concerns are more like, how is my work being used, or how are you using my images, and things like that.
Is there any last questions? I don't think so. Well, thank you so much, Nora.
Thank you.
And thank you to Public Art Fund and Workbench and Development Guild and all of you for coming. And before we end, we're going to have Kim from the UX and Data meetup come and speak about their next meetup.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm the organizer of the UX and Data meetup, which is the sibling meetup to this meetup. I just want to let you all know, after the holidays on January 9th, we'll have an event here at Workbench. The event is called Designing AI Before It Designs Us. We'll have Daniel Huss, who's the head of product management at State Street Corporation, and he'll be talking about some guidelines that we can use when developing products that use AI. So hope to see you here. Sign up for UX and Data, and have a great holiday.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great holiday and end of the year.